Hello, you know me by now. I'm Rima Jolovi. I'm the director of the Improving Maternal Health Measurement Project, and happy to welcome you to this presentation to deliver the results at the end of Objective 2 for this Additional Indicators Online Technical Consultation. It's been an amazing few weeks, and we've had many rich inputs, and I'm very excited to share them with you. Thank you for your patience. We kept the surveys and discussion threads open until midnight on Sunday, which has meant that our team has been hard at work trying to compile all of those results. And we appreciate that you have many demands on your time and your attention. So we're so grateful for your participation, and we hope that you have also found it interesting. So to start out, I want to just give you hearty thanks from all of us for completing Objective 2. There have been speaker presentations, many thanks to the speakers, followed by semi-structured discussion threads, and then surveys. We hope that you found it interesting. We certainly have. During this presentation, I'm going to try to summarize the inputs so far. We have the results compiled from 4 construct-specific surveys. Those surveys were a little bit different for the construct we considered in week 2, and in week 3 we looked at 3 related constructs, and so we have in this presentation compiled a sort of head-to-head comparison. We've also tried to synthesize or bring together the main points from the discussion threads. The next steps include a little bit more clarification, perhaps, following the viewing of these results and consideration of these results. And then finally, trying to home in on the constructs, the specific constructs for further articulation and development into full indicators, looking at the discreteness and the real distillation of the gap for each of the proposed or requested indicators. And so we will have a little more discussion this week, and then a final poll where we'll really come to consensus. And I hope that you can live with majority rather than unanimity. We're looking for a consensus that you can live with. So we've framed our questions in that way and hope that you can consider them in that way. And the next steps for the coming week, Malia has come out to you with group assignments and doodle polls to get into small groups for each of the constructs that we will take forward. And so I very much hope that you can be diligent in responding to her promptly, so that we can get into groups. And similarly to the past few weeks, we'll have a discussion forum open for people to meet and think about issues that are raised and hopefully summarized here, as well as others that you may bring forward, and then a dedicated time to come together with some structured worksheets to help to format and bring into standard form the metadata that we're going to discuss. So that's the sort of overview, and with no further ado, I will go forward and share with you the findings from these interesting first 2 weeks. The first construct that we considered on week 2 was a new untested indicator. In the original EPMM phase 2 formulation, the request from stakeholders was for an indicator expressing the percentage of health workers using MNCAH data for decision making. In the project, what we tried to do was distill out the missing piece, the key component, a critical underlying construct. And so it's not too different here. An indicator that tracks use of maternal newborn health data by health workers for decision making. We asked you what you thought the critical component, the operative word or words or phrases that embodied or defined that construct was, and here's what came forward. Very strong focus on decision making. Use and use of maternal newborn health data. Tracking data use and by health workers. That's interesting. Some of the other pieces I think are also significant: routine health information system, health facility level data, management level, etc. This is a challenging construct, and so you know, the use of maternal newborn health data for decision making by health workers. By health workers, that came out quite strongly, and it's interesting because it diverges a little bit from the discussion, and so that's something to reconcile. We asked for your input, how most usefully to operationalize health workers. And here again, so a little bit divergent from what came out in the word cloud. Health workers came out very strongly in the word cloud, but here and also in the discussion thread, the focus was much more on health facility administrators and district government officials. When you put those together, it's about 75% of respondents, a little bit less than that. But so that's a divergence and something to discuss going forward. Quite a lot of consensus around what data is. Data, people felt quite clearly, is facility level data on healthcare interventions and associated outcomes. And so less so on sort of management inputs, and much less on the sort of construct of data literacy or capacity for data use. Looking at what does use or decision making reflect, there was two constructs came right to the top: evidence of actions taken in response to reported data, and then evidence of a regular process. So again, in the discussion, this came out quite strongly, that balance between sort of a reflection of systematization or routine institutionalization of data review and looking at it, and then evidence of actions taken in response. So interestingly, there was almost an even split. In fact, there was a 50-50 split until the night before, at the 11th hour, right before the survey closed. And so we're very much conflicted, I think, as a group about whether to move forward. And that's something that we hope in this next week we'll really need to clarify and make a decision. People who said that they did not recommend moving forward, generally speaking, the most important reason given was that the underlying construct is not clear enough. So that means it's possible that if we could make some decisions, there are a lot of ways that this construct could be articulated, could be defined, and none of them are necessarily wrong. But if we could make a decision for this exercise about what is one construct that we agree on that needs measurement, we might be able to resolve that. Some people felt that the construct wasn't appropriate for tracking at national, subnational level, but that's interesting given the focus on facility administrators and district level government. So I think, again, there's some more discussion and a little bit more consideration that we can do together, and we'll try to help tease that out in the coming week with the discussion and the final poll, and then make a decision about how to move forward. Challenges to develop a measure seem insurmountable. I think that very much reflects the underlying construct isn't clear enough, and then even if we will be able to do it, there's not capacity to collect. I put this in because I felt like a lot of people would see that as a reason, but our team doesn't feel that that's a reason not to develop an indicator. Developing an indicator and building capacity to use it are sort of two parts of a progression towards improvement of measurement, I would say. So we tried to summarize the discussion, and there was a lot of discussion. So these are things that I hope you will take forward into this week in our attempt this week to reach a final consensus on whether to move forward. There was some talk about process indicator, and again, we saw this balance in the polling between process but also the outcome. There was discussion about operationalizing health workers, and there was quite a lot of agreement that perhaps the focus should be on facility managers and district or state management teams or local government. So again, that was in divergence with what came out in the word cloud, but I think that's because the formulation didn't, the formulation of the constructs put forward didn't articulate that as an option. Data, what do we mean by data? Again, some of these things have been reflected in the polling, but a little bit more nuance, a little bit deeper look. Is data performance data? Is this quality improvement? Is it quality management? Is it routine or periodic, etc.? Use, what is evidence of use? Is that given if the unit of measurement is at the government or district level, are we talking about changes in practice guidelines, changes in policy, and so forth? So again, things to take forward into the small groups and consider. And then some data source and concrete sort of measurement considerations. Again, methodology for classifying health or administrative geographical areas and looking at their improvement. So if it's a quality measurement, looking at performance at this level for national and subnational monitoring. What's the best modality and methodology to use? Next, in week 3, we felt it was important to consider and compare 3 related constructs. And so what we've done here for the rest of this presentation, what you'll see, we asked you to take a simple 1-question survey for each of these related constructs that created the word cloud. And we had quite a lot of rich discussion. In the week to come, in this week, it's a critical task that we need to do now, is to synthesize those feelings and opinions about where the critical component lies and what the discreteness is, so that we can really define 3 discrete constructs or gaps for measurement and decide whether we want to take those forward. And so that's what the survey and the discussion will focus on for this week, landing us hopefully by the end of the week with some clarity on the way forward for the small groups as we go forward. So these are the 3, at first blush, quite related constructs, and I'll go forward and show you what the word clouds and discussions focused on. So this is a 5.2, a challenging construct. It was a modification to existing measures on death registration coverage and birth registration coverage, and the request by stakeholders in UPMM Phase 2 was to combine those in some way. And so there's not very much difference between the way that the original formulation and the construct is, because there's not much to distill out of it. And so here's what came out when we asked you what you thought the critical component, the operative word or phrase was. And many people just said and so that birth and death is what's implied there. Some people focused on registration coverage for each of them separately, and some focused on improving maternal death registration. So, you know, other thoughts were that this shouldn't be one indicator, that it's really about strengthening reporting systems. Others, some people did think that this is about a linkage between mothers and babies and their data, and that there is an argument perhaps for looking at it as a set of indicators that together improve death registration. So lots of diverging opinions and thoughts about it, and here is some of the discussion that I hope that you will take a look at. I'm not going to read every single bullet, it's too much, but I hope that you will, as your first sort of assignment for this week, to read through the synthesis of the discussion points and cogitate on it, percolate it as you take the poll for the final consensus on whether we should move forward. The issue of stillbirths being registered along with live births was something that was really, I would say, a key part of the discussion and the sort of decision-making elements. And so there's some questions about it. How are stillbirths typically registered? Is it only on birth certificates? In some places it is on, is there a death certificate or both? There seems to be the understanding that this is quite variable across countries and even states within countries, for example, the US. And some thought that it would make more sense to have stillbirths included within death notification rather than birth registration. Nevertheless, here they are, and so that may be one of the underlying rationales for a combination linkage of these data on births and maternal deaths. A lot of discussion about feasibility and also rationality, if there's a logical reason for linking. Some people thought that it might be, while it might be ideal that there was a rationale for it, it's infeasible. Other people thought that there's no rationale in it, that there's just no value in linking either the birth registration with maternal, with the individual record for the mothers, linking the mother-baby data on birth and deaths, or even considering them, tracking and monitoring them in tandem as a set. So there's divergent opinions about that. Again, reflection of those opinions. Is there any value in reporting and tracking these two data points as a set? Some people felt that there really is, and other people felt that there isn't. Some people thought they're conceptually completely different circumstances, not a lot of utility to doing that. But others felt that there really was, that it's important to keep a measurement of a mother and her baby linked, and that there are epidemiologic or health rationale for linking. So again, it needs to be, I think, discussed further, and I hope we can do that this week. And come to some kind of a consensus. Again, probably just one that we can all live with. There's another interesting discussion about whether to consider maternal deaths separately or to consider them as a disaggregation of all deaths, deaths to women of reproductive age. And again, opinions were split. Some people felt that it was very important to focus on all deaths of women of reproductive age in order to catch underreporting or misclassification, and also because it's part of MMR estimation. Other people felt that this is really a matter of emphasis, that we should focus on cause of death and death registration through a variety of reporting mechanisms. And so again, opinions not fully aligned. And so I don't have an answer, but I hope we can come up with one this week that's good enough for us to move forward with. The next construct is also new and untested. The original formulation was presence of national information systems that are able to record and report data as described by ICT-PM. And we tried to distill out what is the essential component of that for the project. And what we came out with was an indicator that tracks the capacity of the national information system to record and report maternal and newborn cause of death data. So we asked you what you thought the most important, critical components, words or operative phrases here were, and what came out quite strongly was capacity of the national information system, specifically capacity to track causes of death, maternal and newborn causes of death, and then ICD-PM as a quality standard also came out quite strongly. My understanding is that ICD-PM includes perinatal and maternal, but perhaps that's not true. So ICD-MM is also reflected in there by people who made that distinction. Summary of discussion points that I hope you'll take forward and cogitate on and participate in this discussion so we can try and home in, and in the final poll come forward with a decision that we can all live with. What is the construct of greatest utility at national level? There seemed to be some thought that it's about the maturity of the data system and the attributes that are needed in a score that reflects the system maturity, system capability, or capacity. That came out very strongly, specifically to track maternal newborn cause of death data. The audience, again, a little bit of difference, but all pretty much within the same universe. And then the question about, there was some discussion about whether the quality of those data, like having a harmonized standard like ICD PM or MM is important to articulate specifically in the measure. But it seemed that there was some agreement that this is secondary, given the complexity of the primary measure of capacity to track. And then there were some opinions expressed around protecting the rights and identities of individuals whose data are used and collected in cause of death data. Defining the national information system, there was some thought that we're not talking about just one, but interoperability between parallel systems, and that of course would also add some complexity. So I hope we can tease out a little bit of that as we go forward this week. Finally, Construct 2.2, also new, also aspirational and untested. The original formulation was quite long and complex. Presence of national information systems that are able to record and report data as described by ICD-PM, linking outcomes, births and deaths to maternal and perinatal conditions, and reporting annually on characteristics of these data, births, deaths, and vital events to produce statistics that can be used for monitoring of mortality. And that is a mouthful and very hard to sort of tease out what the underlying construct for measurement is, because there seem to be numerous ones. So we tried very hard to distill it out for the project, and what we came out with was an indicator verifying that the National Health Information System links births and maternal and perinatal deaths and includes causes of death. We asked you what you thought was the most essential, the critical components in this in these two formulations, and here's what came out very strongly, almost unanimous. Almost everyone mentioned linkage, system capacity to link. Linking, now linking what? There was a little bit of diversity, linking National Health Information Systems and CRVS, linking mothers and babies, linking data in CRVS to services or access, or sort of history of care interventions, or also vital registration. So there's some things for us to think about, and the question is whether linkage is what it would take, the attributes needed for linkage can be applied to all of those different kinds of links or not, and something to think about as we go forward. So exactly what I just said, sort of clarifying the underlying construct of linkage. There seemed to be very strong agreement on focusing on the linkage between CRVS and national health information systems. Also some strong support for linkage of individual records across time or settings or data platforms. Talk about linking and pairing mother baby data. And then interesting proposition that linkage requirements would suggest a minimum individual data set or perinatal data set. And so hopefully we can home in on that, and if the groups decide to move forward into articulation, these slides will all be available for the duration of the time that the small groups are working for your reference. How to pare down the complexity. Again, data quality, important but maybe not central. Assessment of which variables and enumeration of their variables, also important, maybe too complex. So again, maybe a measure of system capacity plus completeness plus quality may not be actionable, may not be feasible, and perhaps should be either sub-indicators or separate indicators. So finally, what we thought was important to do, again, a little bit earlier, I had these three related constructs up on a slide. And here what we really tried to do is to highlight the areas of discreteness between these three constructs. So here's what came out. So the first one really about looking at birth and death registration, improving coverage, improving death registration. The second one, really looking at the capacity of the national information system to track causes of death. And finally, in the last one, the system capacity to link, and to link particularly CRVS and national health information systems, but perhaps other kinds of linkages, and what are the attributes of a system that has that capacity to link. So with that, I want to first thank you very much for your rich participation, your engagement. We could not, this would not work without you, and we understand that it's a big ask with all the demands of the current situation. This week is crucial to try to home in on the way forward, to reach consensus about which indicators to fully articulate and what constructs we agree underlie the requests and our own best thinking over the last 2 weeks. Again, these slides will be available all week. For each of the weeks that we work in small groups on each of the constructs, we'll be looking at 2 constructs per week, and we very much appreciate your participation. I want to thank my team and also thank each of you. We will be looking at our data analytics and chasing you down. It's a lot of cat herding, and we apologize, but again, it doesn't work without you, and we are so grateful. We hope you're finding it really interesting. We're finding it rich, and you know, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Here we are under pandemic, and the shiny side of it is that this has been a really interesting way to come together. So my thanks to you, and look forward to the coming week. Take care.